As with the formed heel, the best-fitting socks have a toe pocket. Reciprocation of the cylinder and yarn selection is important, along with an additional aspect that must be considered. There will be more courses in the bottom side of the toe than in the top side of the sock. Also, the sock is doffed with the toe open. Toe closing must follow to complete the sock. By leaving the toe pocket with more courses than the top of the sock, the toe seam will be on top of the toes. If the seam was at the end of the toe or below the toes, the sock would not be as comfortable. Toe closing has traditionally been performed offline from the knitting machine. In the past, a simple sewing machine was used to sew a straight over-edge seam across the sock. The result was often a poor-fitting toe. Today, special closing lines are used to close the toe on socks, and the resulting product is a very well-formed and properly fitting sock. Here we see a typical toe closing line. The first step is to turn the sock face in. A vacuum tube is used for this process. After inversion, the operator feeds the open toe of the sock into a slot that feeds the sock to the sewing station on the line. At the sewing station, the excess fabric is trimmed, resulting in a very thin seam for better appearance, fit, and comfort. At the end of the line, the sock is turned back to face out and doffed into a collection bin. A significant innovation in sock manufacturing is the automatic toe closing station on sock knitting machines. This technology eliminates the separate offline process and the labor to operate that equipment. After knitting, the sock is not doffed in the traditional manner by pressing off the tube. Instead, a special device removes the sock from the cylinder after knitting and transfers it to a linking station where the toe is closed by a fine point looper. When the sock is formed on the knitting machine, the knitting stops, but the cylinder continues to turn with the sock tube on the needles. The last loops formed on each needle remain in place. At the same time, the machine automatically raises the dial with the dial bits disengaged. After the dial raises, a clear view of the last loops formed is seen. With the dial out of the way, a transfer head swings into place to doff the sock. The needles stop, the head drops down, and immediately the transfer points or hooks on the head fan out, and the hooks move in to grab the loops on the cylinder needles. The transfer head then moves up, pulling the sock off the needles and out of the cylinder. As the transfer head starts its move to the toe closing station, the dial drops back down, and the machine starts knitting the next sock. At the same time, the transfer head swings to the toe closing station, pulling the sock with it. When the head stops just above the toe closing mechanism, a plunger raises and pushes the sock up into the head and doffer tube. Since the knitted loops are held firmly by the transfer hooks, the sock is turned inside out within the transfer head. Keep in mind that the toe is open. One side of the toe is held on part of the transfer head hooks. The loops on the other side of the open toe are on the rest of the transfer head hooks. At this point, one side of the ring swings over to the other side, transferring its loops. Now the open toe has been consolidated and waits to be transferred to the linker for closing of the toe. At this point, closing of the toe begins. The sewing mechanism is stationary while the linker head moves the toe through the sewing cycle. Once closed, the toe has a very fine and smooth seam. While the toe is being closed, the cylinder is knitting another sock. The cycle time for toe closing is less than that needed for knitting. After stitching ends, the linking device moves back to the starting position. The plunger moves back up to push the sock into the doffing tube and reverts the sock back to face out. The sock stays in the doffing tube until the knitting cylinder completes the next sock and the toe closing cycle begins again.